For this panel, we're asked to reflect on how to smooth the path, possible initiatives, how to reconcile efficiency and solidarity. So to me, that meant ask the question, what kind of a world do we want to live in? How exactly do we square late-stage capitalism and the need for development, employment and housing with environmental demands? These are the questions we should all be asking ourselves today. But not only today, it is the question that we need to shift to the heart of our decision-making process every day. As many of our speakers have so far over the past day and a half, and will explain now this afternoon, it has become clear that governments, activists, philanthropists, and intergovernmental organizations cannot solve our most pressing global problems, such as inequality and climate change, alone within the current economic system of capitalism. And we cannot rely on them to make the necessary changes in time to protect our planet. We need to up the pace. But how do we convince states, company leaders, entrepreneurs, investors, pension funds, philanthropists that it is not a binary choice between profits and improving lives? As Sir Ronald Cohen, I believe, said, the venture capitalist and innovator, social innovator, it is possible to do well and do good at the same time. The impact revolution starts from the point that social change actors can align their interests with those of big business, investors, and consumers to overturn the focus on fast profit to deliver clean policies, social impact, and longer-term profits simultaneously through a wider and more stable base. Why should we do this? Well, apart from the lower profit margin, but greater sales equals more profits long-term from this wider and more stable base, we will end up with less economic crises and less social crises, so a better life for all of us. Our speakers will explain how we can smooth the path towards this outcome through the education of consumers, the education of business leaders who are realizing that they need to be more environmentally conscious to remain competitive, but can be unsure about how to make it a part of their business model rather than something to be offset by profits. They will explain how we can source sustainably, use recycled material, improve waste, will lead to savings in the long term and less costs cleaning up messes. We can support better NGOs via private investment rather than just foundations, offer microfinance and collateral-free loans, support entrepreneurs that are creating profitable businesses that improve lives. We can all agree that we need a new economic and business model that brings innovative solutions together with investment, educating consumers and pension savers to demand companies to make a positive contribution to society by responsible investments and investment for positive impact. Now I'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker, Professor Enrico Giovannini. He's an economist and statistician, a professor at Tor Vergata University. He was a minister for labor in the Italian government under Enrico Letta, and now, most importantly, is the founder and spokesperson of ASVIS, the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. This is a very, very difficult role after lunch, excellent lunch, to keep you awake and also to stimulate you to think in a different way. Thank you very much, Anna Maria, for inviting me this afternoon. In my presentation, I will address two key issues. First, the sustainable development is not just about environment, and I will try to convince you that we are at risk of economic and social unsustainability, as well as we are at risk of environmental unsustainability. This is a big paradigm shift. I know that there are a lot of businessmen here, business person here, just to be politically correct. And if you think that just taking plastic out of your business, you will save the world, I'm sorry, you are wrong. And the second point I would like to address is how Europe, that in my view is the most important hope we have to take the world onto a sustainable path, can play a crucial role in these very hours. Because what is going on in Brussels, what will be happening in the next few weeks, the absolute absence of interest by this country may change our path towards sustainable development. ASVIS, it was briefly said, is the largest ever coalition of organizations organized in Italy, 240 organizations. And by the way, we have not individual organizations, but networks. For example, business associations or trade unions or the coalition of all municipalities in Italy and so on. Each of them count one. So this is just to give you an idea of the breadth of our work. We just finished yesterday the Italian Festival of Sustainable Development, which is a unique experience worldwide. We had 1,059 events in 17 days, 17 like the goals, and this is absolutely a unique experience, and I, of course, didn't attend all the 1,000 events, but it was a fantastic experience made from the bottom of this country. As we were saying yesterday, other countries have political leaderships, but no mobilization of civil society. We have mobilization of civil society, and I leave to you to conclude the sentence. The good news is that things are really changing, and they must change very quickly. First chart on the top. These are the forecasts by the Oecd in terms of economic growth over the next 40 years. 1.75% of GDP growth in developed countries over the next 40 years on average. To believe that the capitalist system could survive to this kind of growth. And on top of that, we have increased inequalities, but not only increased in the past. Again, OECD figures, inequalities, if we don't change the system, will be increasing in future. Then climate change is a very top story in the newspapers, but yesterday Jeffrey Sachs was with us at the Parliament showing the world heat map that was about yesterday, and things are changing even more fastly than what scientists had imagined. And on top of that, you have the technological revolution. I was member of the Global Commission on the Future Work at the International Labour Office. You can find our report published in February. And the world, notwithstanding what some economists are saying, is going to be very, very difficult. Because it's true, maybe, that also this wave of innovation will create more jobs than what it will destroy in the long run. But this is the first time that the Industrial Revolution hits a globalized world, which means that nobody can tell you whether the new jobs will be created where the old jobs are destroyed. And what happens in the meantime? In Europe, we have already 113 million people at risk of poverty and social exclusion. Do you think that they can resist, we can resist, to that kind of shock? It depends. In the report, we made a lot of recommendations on these, but again, it's a big shift in policy making. In a previous speech, the famous Limits to Growth report by the Club of Rome, published in 1972, was mentioned. The dotted lines are one of the scenarios shown by that report. You see the red one at the right-hand side of the chart. You see the population would have increased up to 8 billion people by 2030, and at that point the system would collapse, taking the population back to 6 billion by the end of the century. And for many years, economists have said, don't worry, capitalism will address this problem, innovation will address this problem, no problem at all. The continuous lines are the story of the last 40 years. We are almost on the projections 40 years old, 45 years old. Normally, when I show these charts, some people leave the room saying, okay, the last few hours I would like to spend them with my family. You remember Deep Impact, the famous movie when an asteroid hits the Earth? The point is that the world has said that this is the most likely scenario. When you mention the 17 goals of the Agenda 2030, I hoped that not only you have learned by heart the 17 goals, not the 169 targets, a little bit too much, but you have read the declaration, where the heads of states and government of 193 countries said, this is going to happen. This is exactly what will happen if we don't change. So don't be surprised if we are at the highest level of number of conflicts in the world ever measured. You see the chart there? I was very surprised by this. This is a chart from the Global Risk report by the World Economic Forum. I said, nobody told me this. Why? Because you see the bottom chart, the number of people who die because of conflicts is relatively small. So we are talking about a huge number of conflicts with not large conflicts. And so media don't pay attention to that. And by the way, look at the other chart on the right-hand side of the slide. That is the number of people who suffer of undernourishment, which was exactly the indicator that the Clever Rome projections were saying this will be the first signal of unsustainability that will lead us to go back to 6 billion people by the end of this century. You can say that this is really fiction or whatever. So maybe you are in the group of people who have already booked bunkers in New Zealand. Have you heard about this? Very rich people from Silicon Valley are doing that. Elon Musk recently had said that we have to build the spatial stations in order to allow rich people to leave the Earth. Have you said that? Have you seen that? Please connect the dots. This is what the best experts in the world in this topic are talking about. So it's not about the future. The world, the Earth, is already making its own revolution, but this will not really create problems to the... sorry. It doesn't work. I'm very sorry for that. Do we have an internet connection?
Yeah, of course.
Great. Don't worry.
There is the Wi-Fi?
No, yes. Okay. Sorry, because it looks like the... No. You can find and show in your own... here you have two monkeys. They do the same job. They just move a rock. And they get in reward a piece of cucumber. And cucumber is absolutely fine for them. And then look at what happens. She gets a piece of cucumber. The other one does the same. But she gets a piece of grape. I don't want to do it. No, I don't want to do it. Do it. What will happen when people will understand that they don't have anymore a future? That is the question. So what we are observing around the world is exactly this. Now, the Agenda 2030 is a great opportunity to rescue the world. But this is a very, very, very radical agenda. Don't think that, as I said, that just putting the plastic away, you will save the world. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like this. The integration of economic, social, environmental, and institutional dimensions requires a huge shift in our mindsets. And we were not trained, as Jeffrey explained, in this world. Again, I'm very sorry, but the problem is that it was put up the PDF. This is why it's not working. Okay, doesn't matter.
This is a video?
No. Sorry for that. Anyway, maybe you can get that. This is how our world works. We get solar energy from outside and we put waste heat outside in the universe. Then we combine natural capital, human capital, social capital, produced capital. We combine them in a production process. We produce GDP. Part of it is reinvested and part of it is consumed for our well-being. The point is that the way in which we produce and the way in which we consume creates wastes, exactly in the logic of Laudato Si' encyclical. Human wastes and physical wastes. We don't like to have wastes out of our house, like we don't like to have homelessness out of our house. When I was Minister of Labor, I clearly saw that for several people, the logic, as the Pope says, is exactly the same. Creating physical waste and human waste, and they are treated exactly in the same way. Someone else has to take care of this, not me. Tell me how much should I pay for that, and I will pay. This is the classical approach of the old economy. The point is that physical waste have an impact on ecological services, ecosystem services, which have an impact on well-being. And up to this point, this chart is known to ecological economists since 1997, I think, Bob Costanza and others. You find this in all ecological economics books. I'm looking at Janesh, just checking this. What I added was that little box on social system services. Peace, vision of future, trust, which is affected by human wastes. And what we are observing around the world is exactly that we went beyond, I don't know what happened, we went beyond the limit. So you don't see my chart anymore. I'm sorry. Someone has, yes, thank you. If you put the 17 goals on the chart, the 17 goals is not anymore a list, but it becomes a plan to change the world. That is the systemic approach that the SDGs require. And this is a huge shift, because in this perspective, you don't have anymore economy first, then eventually environment second, and then society, or environment first, and then or society. Everything is integrated. But I can tell you that getting this new perspective requires a hell of work. And this is what is not happening, especially at political level, but also at corporate level. We ran a survey asking people, do you think that the 2030 agenda is important? And believe it or not, 25% of Italians think that it's not relevant. So I ask myself, what is relevant to these guys? Poverty, environment, economy, and so on, nothing is left out of SDGs. So I'm asking myself, what is important to these guys? Anyway, this is just to tell you how much we have to do to change policies. And our annual report, which is available also in English, deals with these issues for Italy and proposes a lot of policy recommendations, bringing together business associations, environmental associations, trade unions, for example, who don't have really normally the same way of thinking. Our 300 experts who work in our 18 working groups work for 1 year to come out with agreed recommendations. Now, let me spend the last few minutes on Europe. Years ago, with a group of friends and academics, we met in Pretoria, in South Africa, talking about these issues. And we finally published an article on The Guardian that was supposed to be called The Republic of Wellbeing, and The Guardian, just to make it more attractive, changed the title in Say Goodbye to Capitalism, Say Welcome to the Republic of Wellbeing. We asked ourselves, let's suppose that we have a brand new country, really committed to SDGs. What would this country look like? And we said, first point, in the Constitution, this country should have the concept of sustainable development. Because, as we heard this morning, sustainable development is about intergenerational equity. This is justice, not only environment. And it's good to know that France, Switzerland, Norway, Belgium have changed their constitution. But the even better thing is that we have this concept in the Treaty of the European Union. Article 3 quotes twice sustainable development. Sorry, I was told that it was 30 minutes, but it looks like it's less than that.
It's 20.
Is 20, sorry. I will go very quickly to the end. We built indicators on where Europe is about, is vis-à-vis the 17 goals. You can find all this data on our website. And it's clear that Europe is the most sustainable region of the world, but is not on a sustainable path. This is why we have built, and this is just the treaty that I was mentioning, and if you think that you are pro-Europe, please read this, because otherwise we are not understanding each other what Europe should be, according to the treaty. What we have done in our opening event of the festival was to, and by the way, you see that the keywords of this article of the treaty corresponds almost one-to-one with the SDGs. So we can say that Europe has sold to the rest of the world this concept. Let me just say that we have tried to develop a strategy for European Union that could be built on the recent positions taken by the European Parliament, by the European Economic and Social Committee, the civil society, but also by the European Council in April, who said that the SDGs and 2030 agenda should be at the core of the next 5 years' priorities. So, again, this would be a great thing for a country that wants to be the champion. Let me just conclude in saying that these are the 6 points that the leaders of the European Commission and the European Parliament have to address in the next few weeks, because the priorities will be decided in the next few weeks. And let me also say that we took the chance of designing the new Commission. According to our view, we should have 5 vice presidents. 4 of them should be designed, their portfolios should be designed around the 4 pillars of the 2030 agenda. But not economy, society, and so on, economic transition, social cohesion, environment quality, and then the other 2. And we were recently told these days that one of the Green parties just discussing this slide, which is used in the negotiations, said, no, not environmental quality, climate change. And the others said, what are you talking about? The other Greens said, well, environmental quality is much more than climate change. Of course, we need to address climate change. So this is just to say that this slide is being discussed. Our proposal, and I stop here, is to nominate the commissioners in charge of the 17 goals. I don't want to know anymore who is in charge of which policies. I want to know who is in charge of delivering results. That would be a revolution, may be able to bring citizens back to Europe. So it's just to say that we could change. We also design a new European semester. The conclusion is that if leaders want to be really engaged in the 2030 agenda, if they want to sleep well the nights, thinking that what they're doing is good enough, big enough to change the world in order to avoid the disaster that we are heading to, we have to do much more on what is our share. And I think that political leaders in Europe have a great opportunity that we shouldn't miss. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Congratulations on the festival. I know there's literally been hundreds of wonderful events going on all over Italy. If I could just pick up on the very valid point that you made, that the European Union is not on a sustainable development path, even the European Union. And this is obviously a pressing issue requiring a huge shift. So thanks for the warning and reminder that the new European strategic priorities need to be in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, and also for the note of encouragement that civil society is pushing in this direction and ready to support an acceleration, and that citizens can expect a leap forward from politics. Our other keynote speaker, Monsignor Bruno Dufay, is not able to be with us today, but his colleague Tebaldo Vinciguerra is very kindly going to read out his speech on his behalf. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Monsignor Bruno Marie Dufay prepared a text in French. but the organization already prepared a translation in English, and since I've checked the two texts are very similar, I will use the English one. I may add that Monseigneur Bruno-Marie Dufay signed the text, so it may be important for him. 40 years of my ordination as a deacon. So he's also marking an anniversary, even he is not with us today. And the title of the text is Laudato Si, an encyclical to be lived, a call to action, to reflection for social and spiritual conversion. The encyclical letter Laudato Si on care for a common home by Pope Francis was and will remain of great significance to contemporary public opinion, insofar as it addressed the questions and the expectations of a great number of believers and aid organizations, and advocated reflecting on the future of our planet and life. Most likely, this is the first papal encyclical letter to be read and commented in circles which are in no way connected to the Roman Catholic Church, and were even formerly critical of the ethical positions of the Church. Laudato Si participated, to an extent, in the moral and historical impetus of the Paris Agreement during COP21, the UN Climate Change Conference in December 2015. Having said that, it would be insufficient and perhaps even inaccurate to consider this text only as a mere reflection on ecology, even if it is the very integral ecology that Pope Francis advocates, and which analyzes the creation we have received, advances in development thus far, and the fraternal solidarity which we must build. The text subtitle, On Care for a Common Home, suggests that it is necessary to think and act, understand and hope, considering developments and challenges of an ecological, social, economic, and political nature. We can note here that the three terms ecology, economy, and ecumenism have the same Greek root, oikos, meaning home. We must think of living together in the broad sense of the term, encompassing all living creatures, now commonly known as biodiversity, and dialogue among living things. Here we may recall Pope Benedict XVI beautiful insights in his encyclical Caritas in Veritate, which illustrates how the Logos, the word of the Creator, makes us being in dialogos, in the vital act of receiving and giving. When reflecting, we cannot, therefore, consider only the future of those humans who seem to have unlimited power over creation in all the diversity and complementarity of its components. To think about the care of a common home seems to be the greatest challenges of our times. We must learn and relearn how to live together, respecting and valuing all forms of life, from Mother Earth to the humblest being of the cosmos, whose existence is crucial to the balance of the whole. If we return here to the comparison of the body used by St. Paul in the first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 12, we see time and again how each part of the body needs the other to achieve its purpose, and that each part in turn brings to another that which is necessary for its fulfillment. The truly social message of the encyclical Laudato Si is evident from the first chapter of the text, when we are invited to take a close look at what is happening in our common home. Paragraph 17 to 61. We are to look critically in the philosophical sense of the word crisis. Crisis in ancient Greek is choice. In contemplating the diverse conditions in which, not without suffering, life and relationships between living things unfold, we very quickly come to the major problems surrounding the relationship between development and social community. It raises the issue of the harmful effects of our model of economic development, but also, and more fundamentally, of the dominance of technology or technocracy, which sometimes solves one problem only to create others, writes the Holy Father in this paragraph 20 of the encyclical. The issue of global warming and endangered ecosystems shows us that the climate, which is a common good, is damaged, and along with it, the possibility that humans and their communities will be able to continue to live in harmony on the land of their ancestors. Here we have another call to reflection, as we need to create this harmony, starting from the plurality of the complementarity of beings themselves in their daily interaction with humans' otherness and with the objectivity of constructed things. Our use of the natural resources on which rests the very existence of our global economy will very soon reach its limits, along with the access to water, that basic and universal human right, water, synonymous with the right to life and the respect for inalienable human dignity. Rethinking access to drinkable water, water for irrigation and sanitation, means opening up real opportunities for dignity and peace. It is common knowledge that both conflicts and peace treaties can be born out of a water source, a well or a river. Finally, we are called to protect endangered biodiversity and to understand the challenge of the vital complexity, richness and fragility of forest areas, such as the Amazon, the lungs of our planet, the Congo Basin, wetlands, oases, oceans, and marine species. In fact, they are threatened by industrial exploitation and inconsiderate use of toxic substances, aimed at a violent and excessive production. The link established between a kind of development that causes death whilst claiming to bring life and the social connection is clearly expressed in this sentence from the encyclical, which is, in an end of itself, an appeal to our conscience. Quote, "A true ecological approach always becomes a social approach. It must integrate questions of justice in debates on the environment, so as to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor." End quote, paragraph 48. The act of thinking about current reality and our truth about the future cannot, therefore, separate ecology and social justice. Generally speaking, Laudato Si requires an approach that takes into account the fact that in this world of techne, everything is connected. Ecology, economy, and the social, cultural, and spiritual aspects of life. Overemphasis of techne could lead us to lose the richness of poiesis, to use two categories from the Western philosophical tradition inspired by ancient Greek philosophy. Practical skills and know-how, techne, can too easily exhaust and replace a contemplative approach to reality and all beings, poiesis, from which we obtain the modern term poetry. Once again, we are entreated to think of ecology as social justice and solidarity, as the expression of an integral ecology honoring all aspects of life, the planet, the community, and the person. The principle of solidarity, which Pope John Paul II called for in response to the interdependence among countries and peoples in the context of globalization, require us to look at the other person as a helper, an equal, a brother. This was Sollicitudo Rei Socialis. Our common home is therefore both the idea and the experience of objective and subjective complementarity among members of the same human family. At the end of the day, as a noted 20th century philosopher phrased it, we only think and build in the way we live in our home. In other words, integral ecology is a peaceful and just way of living together as humans and part of humanity, in accordance with the psalmist's vision for brothers to live together in unity. Clearly, when reading this encyclical, we are entreated to open our minds, to adopt a certain way of thinking and, by extension, undergo a conversion in our way of thinking and living. It invites us, in fact, to what we may call existential shifts in our daily relationships with nature and material goods, in our work and in our human activity. In this regard, the process of intellectual, ethical, and spiritual reinterpretation, this seeing, judging, acting, which underlines the very architecture of the encyclical text, urges the readers to be vigilant and become involved, so that they can continue to build. It is not about abandoning development, but experiencing it as a path towards humanization, staying mindful of what happens to others, especially the poor, those who suffer, and the migrants. Indeed, nobody is so poor as to be incapable of contributing to shared history. Every person has inside of them the promise of life. This personalist conviction underpins reflection and opens the mind to social action. Such existential shifts to which the text of Laudato Si calls us can be identified as follows. First, there is the call to let our hearts be touched by what is happening to our common home and those who live or who are trying to find a place there. The starting point of ecological conversion is a true, delicate encounter. The culture of encounter, which reconciles knowledge and sensitivity, is an integral part of this essential intellectual and moral shift. Next, there is a reflection on our mode and model of development. We can no longer only operate under the law of technocracy, according to which everything that is technically possible is automatically, morally justifiable or accepted as progress. The excessive anthropocentrism, which makes man owner and master of the world, and the insatiable culture of more and faster, this is what the Pope in his own language called rapidation, oblige us to seek another cultural paradigm for development. What does this mean? A paradigm is a matrix of reflection, or most simply, a way of thinking. We must consider the question from a physical, economic, cultural, and spiritual point of view. What does it mean to develop? What does it mean to self-develop? How can our development, our growth and enrichment be considered progress? Here, we see that such shift takes us from having more and being able to do more to being here and being for others, and therefore to the growth in humanity, which is the joy of personal and collective fulfillment. The new cultural paradigm of development, therefore, consists of shared memory, hope for future generations, belief in God the Creator, and the shared responsibility He entrusts to us. Memory, hope, belief, and sharing. At the same time, we are aware that another shift is asked of us: the return to a sober life, built around the two pillars of limitation, a reminder of our mortality, and joyful sharing, such as described in the Acts of the Apostles, about the first Christian community. We need to think in terms of measuring and respecting what was given to us, both in our exploitation of natural resources and in our consumption. We can already sense that the unlimited is the path of death, and this so clearly illustrated in the exponential production of waste, which is transforming our planet, land and sea, into a gigantic rubbish bin and disseminating a throwaway culture, which spurs not humans themselves when they are considered inefficient, old, obsolete, useless, or surplus. Here we must examine a third shift, which is just as important as the previous two, and sheds further light on the relationships between ecology and social justice. It regards the work that needs to be done on the glaring and increasingly shameful inequalities within our supposedly developed societies, as well as between the countries. Our liberal and technocratic development has been accompanied by a social rift between those who master the increasingly innovative techniques and who have benefited, in the true meaning of the word, from investment in the so-called high value-added industries, and those who have been kept out of this development. We are witnessing a growing gap between those who have more and consolidate their assets instead of using them to support the creation of jobs or the access to knowledge and expertise, and those who do not have enough to satisfy their basic needs, access to water, food, healthcare, education. We therefore see this gap amplified on a backdrop of deviance and desperate acts of violence. Such glaring inequality cannot fail to touch the hearts of men and women whose conscience has remained sensitive, preoccupied with the question of the future for life. The crisis brought about by the technocratic paradigm of development is now returning to affect the very actors in this development without conscience. It is a cultural and spiritual, and not just an economic or political crisis, which calls for an ecological and social conversion, which must be lived as a new dialogue between man and nature, man and his fellow man, man and God, and man and himself. The four cardinal points of this compass draw a space that is open to the grace of God to inspire human initiatives, which concerns everyone. We are all aware of the urgency of this crisis and the fact that we are currently at a crossroads, even if political authorities and powers continue to put a heavy pressure. There is a need for an education that turns into dialogue between all actors, old and young, citizens, leaders, religious people, experts, poets, and spiritual guides, to create a culture of cooperation where each person, respecting the experiences of the others, is him or herself enriched and can grow. We can see that after the diagnosis of the problem, the appeal for contemplation, and the stage of proposals, the encyclical moves on to a final chapter dedicated to ecology, education, and spirituality. Seen in the light of faith, our interest in social issues is a spiritual path, which brings us from selfish consumerism to a new universal consciousness, and from compassion to responsibility. All facets of our existence come together here to bring about this overall personal conviction, following the example of St. Francis of Assisi, for whom every part of creation is a reminder of the greatness of the Father's love. Laudato Si is therefore addressed to each of us on our different paths and in our different communities as an encyclical to be lived and not a theoretical and definitive text, an active and generous path to conversion and not a closed doctrine. I quote, "First, it entails gratitude and gratuitousness, a recognition that the world is God's loving gift, and that we are called quietly to imitate his generosity in self-sacrifice and God's works." Almost finished. It also entails a loving awareness that we are not disconnected from the rest of creatures, but join in a splendid universal communion, end quote, paragraph 220. The appeal to our consciousness, both in the personal and universal sense, is a recurring message throughout the text of Laudato Si. We are to be aware that we are actors and members of the human community. The text couches this word in terms of our relationships. Our consciousness is our relationships with the other persons, the others in creation, the others in humanity. Without these relationships, we remain in an existence that is governed solely by the logic of production and consumption. Again, thinking about the society we want to build and taking ownership over what we become are essential attitudes to cultivate if we want to address the challenge of protecting and guaranteeing the future of our common home. Last paragraph. In the expression of our shared faith, the sacraments, essential signs of the grace of God, Creator and Father, the freedom of Christ, Son and Brother in our humanity, and the inspiration of the Spirit of Pentecost, feed the relevance of the first and ultimate reference to the Word that creates, saves, and reconciles. For there can be no true and still less action which is not brought only by hope, which reminds us that history does not end here, and it is not too late to take care of creation and of the future of our common home. Here and now begins the future of lives. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tebaldo, for stepping in. I think it was very useful for all of us to have this thoughtful reminder of the actual text of Laudato Si, which has brought us all here together, and what it actually calls on us to think about and do. Our development cannot be seen as progress if it comes at the expense of those left on the margins. It's really interesting, the point that you said as well, that this is perhaps the first encyclical of a pope to be read by an audience and in circles that don't recognize themselves as belonging to the Catholic Church and who perhaps have even been critical of the Church. Now I'd like to welcome Sabina Alkaya, Professor Sabina Alkaya, the director of the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, which is within the Oxford Department of International Development inside the University of Oxford. Her research has included welfare economics, the multidimensional measurement of poverty, and happiness indexes. So it should be interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Friends, we have had a feast. We've heard about so many priorities of children, of water, Laudato Si, and getting the word of that encyclical out, about climate change, about nutrition, and about our own connection with the creation. And the question is, how do we start to ground these and move towards action? So what I will do is a very, very small piece of the story, but try to give you an idea of how to draw together a small set of priorities, such as those Enrico and others have mentioned, and action them. So I'm an economist and work on measurement, and so first I will give a very narrow example related to poverty, and then broaden it out using Bhutan's gross national happiness index. But the motivation following Amartya Sen, following Laudato Si, is when we stay with poor people's experience. Their experience of poverty is that many different kinds of disadvantage batter them at the same time. And so to address them, in the Sustainable Development Goals, it's recognized that poverty has many forms and dimensions. of course, as does well-being. So a very simple example of how to try to make this visible as a measurement person to people like you who can do something about it is to make an index. So the example I'll give is a global multidimensional poverty index we update every year for 5.7 billion people in the developing world. And it has 10 indicators that reflect SDGs 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 11. But it's at the individual level. Is somebody in your household malnourished? Has a child died? Is a child out of school? Or is there nobody in your household with 6 years of schooling? Do you have clean cooking fuel, adequate sanitation, safe drinking water, electricity, decent housing, and more than one of small set of assets like a telephone, television, radio, animal cart, refrigerator, bicycle, or motorcycle? So what a measure like this does is it starts with each person. Take Amuda, a 14-year-old girl in South India. And it says, which of these 10 indicators is she deprived in at this time? And in her case, she and her family are deprived in 44% of the indicators, which is more than 1/3. So she's identified as multidimensionally poor. We also know the intensity of her poverty. It's 44%. And we also know what she is deprived in, indicator by indicator. So how does that help you, a policymaker, a business person, somebody in the church, to have more informed actions that integrate across the same deprivations that poor people experience? So first of all, we can say what percentage of people are poor. And we can do this nationally, but that's very crude. And so we need to go in. We need to zoom in and look subnationally, which we can with these data sets to over 1,100 regions. But then we need to say, what do we do? Let's say this is my project area, this is my parish. So you need to pull it apart and look at the shape, in this case, of poverty. So Tajikistan and Peru actually have the same level of poverty. About 12% of people are in acute poverty. But how they are poor is very different. In Tajikistan, you need to work on nutrition and school attendance. But in Peru, it's different. You have to look at adult literacy, at water and sanitation. Different deprivations are their features. Within countries, for children, for people with disabilities, there are different shapes to the deprivations they experience day by day. And there are, of course, possibilities to track how this changes over time. So, for example, we looked at India, which over a decade took out of multidimensional poverty 270 million people, the same number of people China took out of income poverty in a decade from 1995 to 2005. So that's a global measure, but it's not appropriate for every country. So many governments now make national measures that reflect the character of their nations. All official statistics in Latin America add labor. Afghanistan launched its MPI at end of March and adds, of course, security, income, and production shocks. Sierra Leone launched 2 weeks ago and adds other dimensions. So you tailor a measure to your own circumstance, and then you use it to allocate resources, to coordinate, to target. What is interesting for me is we heard this morning of a lack of political leadership, but there is some political leadership here. For example, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, former president of Colombia, Juan Manuel Santos, set up a roundtable with ministers. They were not permitted to send deputies. They met twice a year to move the needle on poverty. They competed with each other in other spaces, but when it came to poverty, they needed to work together. And they learned they needed one another to be cost effective. The Minister of Health couldn't reach his goals without water, sanitation, education, and transportation ministers working with him. But the foundation also draws on the business community. So I thought you might be interested in something that's a bit new to us, which is businesses who are saying, how can I align my activities with my national goal to reduce poverty in non-monetary dimensions? So I'll tell you a story. Ernesto Castañero in Costa Rica was the head of the biggest bank, the BAC, went to a slum, had a change of heart, That's very important. President Santos took CEOs. They pretended they were enumerators. They did surveys of poor people and changed the heart. And he said, I wonder if any of my employees are multidimensionally poor. He did the survey for the national MPI. He filled it out himself, and then his employees followed. And he found out that 12% of them were poor by their national measure. And they weren't all the cleaners. It was also middle managers that had both sets of parents and some unemployed kids at home. So part of his work as an ethical business leader was to think of how to address their well-being. And now he is joined by many other businesses in Costa Rica and other countries. Similarly, the business communities are engaging. So that's a very concrete, but a very narrow aspect of the SDG agenda, but an important one, because the first goal of the SDGs is to end poverty in all forms and dimensions, because it does have also in our social teachings a kind of priority. And we spun off a social enterprise, Oxford's first. It's a bit difficult to do there. Lastly, how do we take this beyond poverty to some of the other, including the environment and other aspects of well-being? I have the honor to work with the Royal Government of Bhutan on their Gross National Happiness Index, which includes 9 dimensions. And the first includes spirituality, your prayer, your meditation, the degree to which you consider the consequences of your action, your anger and frustration, and your joy and generosity. It also has health, including mental health, education, including knowledge of plants and legends, time use, enough sleep, culture, good governance, community vitality, giving back by volunteering and helping, ecological diversity, and living standards. 2 slides just to show you what this does. First of all, like a poverty measure, we start with each person, each of you perhaps, and look across 33 indicators. Where do I have sufficiency? This is not richness. The income cutoff is 1.5 times the poverty line. And then we see how it changes over time. And what was interesting when Bhutan updated its GNH index after 5 years is that what had increased was material, living standards, ecology, they have fantastic policies, service delivery, health. But what had decreased was also interesting. Every single spiritual and psychological indicator had decreased. My sense of belonging had decreased. Subjective health had decreased. And so this started a conversation about what values were and whether the social change was going in the right direction. What if this kind of dialogue was done in your parish? What if it was done in the family or in a larger community? It might be interesting as one way to try to use metrics that could guide actions and policies, but also the bottom-up kind of reflection and activity that Enrico was talking about earlier. So that's a little taster into how some measurement work tries to make visible the overlapping deprivations that people address, whether in well-being or in poverty, and then try to show enough information that whether it's political leaders or business leaders or family leaders, that they can have a common conversation starter to work on. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Sabina. I think we could all learn from Bhutan. I think we'll just move through each of our roundtable speakers first, and then have some wider discussion between us and take some questions also from the audience. So if I could welcome our next speaker, Francesco Vanni d'Archilafi from Citigroup. He will be speaking about sustainable finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for the avoidance of doubt, I'm not Jean McQuaid, who was supposed to give the speech today, but he had a hard encounter with the stairs at his house, and so I'm here with you. Now, all the speakers have been excellent, especially the professors and Mr. Potocnik. But I would say that there needs to be a sense of urgency in all of this. And so now we're moving to execution, and hopefully in my remarks I'm going to try to share some of the things we have done as a financial institution, but most importantly, all the things that we're working on that are hopefully aligned with the directions we all have to go. In his presentations, Janez Potočnik clearly laid out a daunting array of global challenges, highlighting the most acute risks posed by climate change, deepening income inequality, and strained natural resources. He referred to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, as the North Star to help guide us in tackling these global challenges, a view which we would wholeheartedly concur, and on which we as an institution have done considerable work, and I will return to that theme later. I know that we're all struck both by the urgency of the challenge that both Mr. Potočnik and Professor Giovannini laid out, and by the need, therefore, for also the private sector to play a significant role in addressing these challenges, both from a risk and from an opportunity perspective. And one, I should add, not only commensurate with our capabilities and responsibilities, but which the financial community, and there are many representatives in the hall today of the financial community, is perhaps well positioned to tackle. It is becoming increasingly clear that these societal and financial risks are in many ways interchangeable, and hence all elements of our society have a key role to play. I'm also keenly aware of the financial sector responsibility to thoughtfully assess not only the foreseeable risk to our business model, and most importantly, those of our clients, but also the opportunity these challenges provide to leverage our core competencies and work with our clients and our value and our shareholders, stakeholders, to finance the urgently needed transition to a low-carbon economy. Operating at the intersection of finance and climate change, many responsible actors in our sector have followed a common trajectory. First, manage the environmental footprint of the institution's direct operations with a focus on energy use, greenhouse gas reductions, and implementing green building principles. Managing risk associated with climate change, risk not only to financial institutions but to our clients. Financing climate change solutions and the transition to a low-carbon economy. In the early 2000s, we began measuring and reporting on our own footprint, starting with an energy use for what is now over 7,000 facilities around the globe in 98 countries. But 2002, we were reporting on our environmental footprint on our annual Global Citizenship report. We also began analyzing the impact of our financing and understanding the environmental and social risk associated with that. In 2003, we were one of the 4 banks to establish the Equator Principles, today co-signed by 96 financial institutions in 37 countries that have adopted those principles. We have a broad environmental and social risk management policy that includes due diligence and requirements for project-related financial services. We have established sector standards for higher risk sectors like coal mining, coal-fired power, forestry, and palm oil. We also set our first energy and greenhouse gas reduction targets, and since 2017, when the recommendations from the G20 Financial Stability Board Task Force on climate-related financial disclosures, we've adopted them, and this deeper, more systemic risk analysis and sophisticated form of risk analysis, I should say, is, a wave that most financial institutions are adopting. Equally important as a bank is our activity financing change. And we hope that we're helping drive sustainable financial solution. and to direct capital to environmental and climate change-related projects. In 2007, we put a 50 billion financing target for the following 10 years, and we did that much sooner. Then we put another target of 100 million, and we're almost done with that, and we're thinking what our next target should be. Both targets were executed ahead of schedule. Now, as a bank, you could imagine we've done a lot of financing, structuring, and debt placing. I'll just give you 2 examples, but you can read in our citizenship report all the other activities we've done. We financed the largest ever project financing in the global renewable sector. It's called Project Hornsea 1, which is a UK offshore wind farm located in the southern part of the North Sea, with a total capacity of 1,218 megawatts that will supply energy to more than 1 million UK homes. And also, for example, not only we've issued our own green bond and we've helped our client issue their green bonds, but we were the book runner on the Republic of Poland 2 billion dual tranche green bond offering in 2018. The 30-year tranche was the longest ever green bond issued by a sovereign. We're also leveraging our capabilities to help support sustainable cities and meet their infrastructure needs. And there are a lot of examples ranging from mass transit to clean water systems, etc. We're not the only one. I mean, the financial services industry is focusing in this big transformation, and banks globally committed 247 billion in 2018 in sustainable and climate finance, according to Bloomberg. This trend is accelerating, and I think it's also an important indicator, the volumes of how the finance sector is working with the larger business community in responses to the needs and the objectives of our clients and some of the issues that we've discussed today that are part of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 Agenda, and obviously Laudato Si. Policy solutions are also essential, and as you probably know, we've been very supportive of the Paris Agreement since it was founded. We have reiterated that support, even as somebody that was mentioned by Professor Sachs has sought to distance himself and his country from the Paris Accord. And we took an additional step last month of signaling our support as one of the signatories of the Guiding Principles for Federal Action on Climate. What about the future? We and our competitors are committed to leveraging the power of finance and capital markets to bring much-needed financial, intellectual, and human capital to bear to these challenges. I both acknowledge and strongly support this call to collective action. Our commitment, as well as the commitment of the industry, is to continue to expand, driven by our clients, but also our investors, and importantly, our employees. We need to follow through on the actions that we have as a global community we have started, related to both risk and innovation, and accelerate them. To finalize, again, Janez Potočnik asked us to contemplate what will be required for all of us to live by our conscience in this full world. One of the most memorable observations that he makes is that we won't get to our goal by walking faster, especially if we're walking in the wrong direction. That's why he refers to the UN Sustainable Development Goals as our societal GPS, making sure that we're on the right track to a more sustainable and responsible future. But the SDGs themselves are very complex. They are all inextricably linked, like Professor Giovannini mentioned, with numerous feedback loops. Not all of them positive, and I'll take one more minute. Trillions of dollars of capital want to be invested sustainably, but struggle to translate an investment philosophy which desires alignment to the SDGs into practical investment strategy, given that complexity. With this in mind, CT has developed and published a framework for the financial community which tries, as far as possible, to simplify the SDGs, to examine those interlinkages, to determine the driving forces and resulting benefits, and thereby determine a set of critical paths, our so-called pathway to success, which can lead to effectively and efficiently to the achievement of the goals. It allows us to identify who is best placed to do what, from the public sector to the private sector to the investment community, and what the route might be. We examine the goals individually, attempting to lay out both the incremental financial cost opportunity to achieve the goal and the human benefit that might be gained by solving it. In a world of scarce resources, it also provides an indication of which path might achieve the broadest human, environmental, and systemic benefit for the least financial cost. We identified incremental physical investment needs of around 1.5 trillion per year, while social investment areas, in the energy and circular economy, while social investment areas on education, health, and hunger adapt to an annual incremental opportunity of 800 million. I know, I'll close. The financial community, as I said, is working to bring new solutions. But because of our resource-constrained world, new insights, new knowledge, new solutions and new incentives to change and transform are the only resources we have left that can bring that can be rightly regarded as limitless in their potential. And these insights and incentives must also be augmented by the partnership across the public and private sectors, working together with civil society to exercise leadership with urgency on these challenges. Apologies for the time. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Francesco, especially for the reminder about the urgency of the problem. If we can now welcome Song Po Lan, the principal of the Malaysian Academy for Han Studies, which provides ethical and moral education with a focus on traditional Chinese moral values. Thanks.
Thank you, the moderator, Ms. Hannah, and the president of the conference. Greetings. I'm honored to be given the chance to speak here by Chairman Wu because he had a last-minute change of schedule and the conference to share on the topic of the concordances of discordances and discordances of the Chinese culture with respect to the Laudato Si, the experience of young people. But before this, I should first briefly talk about the things that I have learned from Chairman Wu as it is closely related to this topic. In 2017 and 2018, Chairman Wu spoke at the Ethics in Action meetings in Vatican, where he put forward the idea of developing a Chinese management system based on Chinese ancient philosophy that put human and their relationships with the interests of the ecology first, rather than seeing the ecology as something that can be exploited excessively because of human greed. He called upon us to return to the ancient Chinese wisdom for answers. His belief is grounded in the worldview of ancient Chinese culture, which sees that Tian, Di, and Ren, heaven, earth, and human, together are the three treasures in the universe. Each is of equal importance, and understanding that all we are one family, we are one entity, is the only way we can sustain our world's development. The Laudato Si carries a subtitle of On Care for Our Common Home, and home being the refuge of the family sits at the core of the Chinese culture. Family is the place closest to true love. It is the place that provides the most trustworthy and all-rounded upbringing for a child, and it is where our journeys in life begins. As the Chinese saying goes, harmony at home brings prosperity. My Australian colleague used to tell me, happy wife, happy life. Harmony at home is fundamental. Many of these examples are illustrated in Chairman Wu's last two talks at Vatican. As you can see, the education sits at the root, and only when the roots are well looked after can we enjoy abundant fruits. So the programs that he has administered in his company include 300 hours of training and education for his workers, including their children. And in the three aspects of education, not only just education in words, but also education in environment and also in actions. Respect all things, including he has reserved a land to cultivate it as a wetland. And most of all, managers lead by example. The caring enriched with virtue education enables everyone not only to feel true love, but also helps to put love, respect, helpfulness, and humility into their hearts. While many people put profit before virtues, Mr. Wu put virtues before profit, and he achieved corporate drop of water use, drop in wastage, increased yearly turnover, increased net profit. Chairman Wu has demonstrated that virtues achieved through moral, ethics, and causality education will bring in wealth and results that are in line with 17 SDGs. In other words, eudaimonia, happiness that is cultivated through virtues and an end and complete by itself. So we can see that education is not just learning skills and trade to sustain economic means. 教育, education, consists of two words. 教 is teach by example, and 育 is empowering a child or student to do good and help him or her to correct their mistakes. The standard of success is not measured by how much money one makes. Instead, it is a process that strives to attain inner peace with oneself and others by minimizing greed. Two words appeared in almost all Chinese family mottos written by the ancients are diligent and thrifty. A far cry from the depiction of today's Chinese youths as the crazy rich Asians. I should say that most Chinese are not crazy rich. We are just taught to work hard and not have to rely on charities. Here comes my school. The Malaysian Han Studies sits in a 13-acre land. It promotes classical Chinese literature study to seek solutions for today's problems. It is a school designed to be green and environmental friendly, houses a 300-people dining hall, a 400-seat auditorium, 20 classrooms, 2 libraries, meeting rooms, and a recording studio. Students as young as 4 years old can be seen studying Chinese classics in our school, and we have more than 50 staffs and hundreds of volunteers supporting our projects. To our school patrons, if no one understands what was written by the ancient Chinese thousands of years ago, their wisdom will be lost, and we will very soon forsake the idea of 天地人 being inseparable in the name of rapid economic development. But in my experience, until the talks are practiced, it is not easy to convince people, especially young people, that in this society of rapid internet and social media advance, selfless contribution for the good of the whole ecology is workable or even desirable. My late father, who owned and ran a Chinese medical herbal store, refused an offer to sell herbs that mixed first-grade herbs with second-grade herbs to make more money. When asked why he did that, my father said, "For the sake of my grandchildren." These words about leaving something good for the future generations left permanent impressions on me, and I knew at that point as a young child, my late father received this thinking from Grandpa, and his good business practice did not cost him to lose money, but his business actually became better when he finally won back many customers. As the appointed CEO of Malaysian Han Studies, Chairman Wu admonishes the management to lead by example. I remember in 2016, when we first moved into the new school complex, the place was dirty, we had nothing, the dining hall wasn't ready, we didn't have anything to cook, but he was with us, leading us to clean and accompany us to overcome many obstacles. And you can see we didn't have a place to eat, so we had to sit at the outside to have our breakfast, and we cooked our breakfast. Without any pot, we had to improvise. And he said, don't cause troubles for others, don't waste things, don't take advantage of others, and most of all, be trustworthy. Today, visitors and students, irrespective of race and religions, who came to our center told us that they could feel the peaceful atmosphere once they stepped into our school. The same peaceful atmosphere could be felt at Good Art, the company run by Chairman Wu in Suzhou, China. The language of love is indeed universal. We would embrace technology based on the same moral considerations. If we rely too heavily on technology, we lose sight of what makes humanity great. We no longer seek answers from studying the religious teachings and classics that have built our foundation. If we want to advance technology and live a better quality life, we must look to nature as a source of inspirations. Use the quality of selflessness, true love, like nature's air, to unconditionally love all things. In 2018, the Malaysian Han Studies conducted more than 20 courses, 2,000 hours of teaching and learning, and received close to 4,000 visitors. For us, the art of work and business is to uncover our innate goodness. We work to strengthen our resolve to discover the relationship of work with living, life, and morality. If nothing more, it is a constant process of discovering our potential and refining our innate wisdom. In 2019, we have made a resolution to build an academic administration, a teaching faculty, and a volunteer corps that are more systematically run using various digitized teaching technology, including social media and blended learning, to reach out to more students and teachers. We hope by doing so, more Chinese and English-speaking virtue ethic teachers and facilitators could be trained. The Chinese native culture, in summary, does not have religion by social science definitions. 宗教, the term now used to debate religion, in fact means the primary education, the most important teaching, and the most venerated transformation. So other than seeing the world as the creations of God, the ancient Chinese culture concords with the moral implication of climate change, the danger of unbridled technological development, and the harm that it will bring to the poor in our beautiful Mother Earth. Eventually, all human, rich or poor, will be affected. So to resolve these problems, the Chinese forefathers have educated their descendants and led by example to minimize selfishness, understanding that prosperity is a natural outcome of a harmonious home. I'm a Buddhist, but like my elder sister who's Catholic, I hold great respect for Pope Francis. His concern for nature, justice for the poor, generous self-giving, his open-heartedness are truly touching and worthy of our utmost respect. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I think we can all look forward to finding our innate goodness. Next, I'd like to welcome Gabriela May Lagunas, a data scientist with the clean energy renewable company Bbox, who's going to speak to us about innovation and share the experience of the younger generation. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Before I start, I would like to thank Mrs. President Ana Maria Tarantola, the Fondazione, and everybody here for the opportunity of being part of this great discussion today. My name is Gabriela, and I'm here to talk about the role of youth and innovation in this debate. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis says, "Never have we so hurt and mistreated our common home as we have in the last 200 years." I think this is one of the main motivations behind Laudato Si and the reason why we're gathering here today. Regardless of our individual beliefs, we can agree that humankind has sinned for centuries against nature and against itself due to greed and selfishness. The consequences of such sins are materializing right now the rise of global temperatures, the beginning of the sixth mass extinction, the melting of the poles, droughts, floods, hurricanes, wildfires, just to name a few of the signs that we have no other choice but to change in order to survive. The magnitude of the climate crisis we are living today makes it the biggest challenge we had ever faced. And while it is true that our shortcomings have caused it, I wholeheartedly believe that we can find the necessary solutions in the creativity, bravery, and generosity of people. In addition to the powerful message of Pope Francis gave to the world in Laudato Si, the clearest example of these virtues is the remarkable strength of the message the generation just after mine is giving. Millions of courageous teens inspired by Greta Thunberg are taking the streets every week in order to tell us that it is imperative to take action right now in order for there to be a future for which is worth having an education. Laudato Si and the climate activism of the generation Z are unmissable calls for immediate action. So the question is not whether or not we answer to these calls, but how do we answer them? There is an older youth, we, the so-called millennials, that are lucky enough to have already professional qualifications while retaining the energy and idealism that comes from a young age. It is we who are engineering the change needed to move forward. This privileged youth has the resources to work for a solution that expresses the values that the world needs: solidarity before nationalism, human dignity before capitalism, the good of the world before the good of the individual. This is what I have the fortune of experiencing every day at work. I work at a London-based global company called Bbox. Our mission is to transform lives and unlock human potential through access to clean, reliable, and affordable energy. Bbox is a next-generation utility company that has installed over 150,000 solar home systems and has brought clean, reliable, and affordable electricity to nearly 1 million people, with substantial operations in countries including Rwanda, Kenya, Togo, DRC, Nigeria, and Pakistan. This is possible through the application of Internet of Things devices to remotely collect data to allow engineers and technicians to anticipate issues and act whenever customers need support. With electricity as an entry point, Bbox aims to satisfy many other needs that are required for human development, such as water, finance, white goods, and clean cooking solutions. All this is done through Pulse, or cloud-based management platform, which digitalizes Bbox management of employees, customers, and products across remote locations. All this necessary for achieving scale. Our work has tangible contributions to 10 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. These include SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, SDG 1, poverty alleviation, and naturally SDG 13, climate action. Thanks to the offset of thousands of tons of carbon emissions, resulting from the transmission to clean energies. Bbox is being recognized across the energy industry, having recently won the highest sustainability prize in energy. These results have been possible thanks to the talented work of many engineers, business experts, technicians, and academics. But moreover, our work is scaling rapidly thanks to strategic partnerships with investors, governments, telecommunication firms, major energy companies, and much more, giving us confidence in the future of our growth, our reach, and our global impact. For instance, in January, Bbox secured a 31 million investment from Africa Infrastructure Investment Managers. This will allow Bbox to install 2 million solar systems by 2022, bringing clean energy to over 10 million people in these African countries. Another great example of a key partnership is the government of Togo. From March this year, Bbox customers in the country started receiving a subsidy to spend on solar energies, in what is the first government subsidy for the purpose of solar energy in payments in Africa. As a data scientist, I work with the data insights team. Our objective is to impact the behavior of our staff and our customers in order to maximize the reach of our products and to ensure that we are a data-driven organization. This is crucial because in the face of the current climate crisis and of the many challenges that derive from it, companies and governments cannot afford to make decisions based on anything else but the truth. appropriate data management, analytics, and responsible artificial intelligence are tools that ought to be used for these purposes. However great and hopeful these results are, the work of bbox alone is not enough for what the world needs right now. The amount of energy the world consumes is 7 to 8 orders of magnitude higher than the amount of energy bbox produces. And the carbon emissions that need to be offset are about 1 million times bigger than the amount that we have managed to eliminate in our 9 years of operations. This is the greatest challenge humanity has ever faced, and the youth simply cannot do it alone. We need our global leaders and authorities to do 3 key things for us. First, we need you to invest on us. The money of the world has to go to the technology and products we are developing to solve this issue, and to the jobs that will help us build a future together. Second, we need you to make policies for us. Togo is an example of how governments should be directing energy consumption within their populations. There is no reason why oil and gas still be subsidized when we all know that we ought to cut emissions and keep fossil fuels underground if we are to have a chance in this climate crisis. National and international policies cannot keep making the rich richer while the world and the people it hosts is in danger. The Green New Deal in the US and similar policies in leading nations have to be supported and put into action as soon as possible. Finally, we need you to listen to us. The youth cannot be punished for putting the world and its future before the material interests of a broken system. I would like you to take a moment to reflect on the path that has brought you here today. Please remember what it's like at the beginning of your careers. Where were you 10 or 20 years ago? Or maybe longer? 25 years ago, I was a 2-year-old making my best to let my mother know when I was hungry. I am sure that many people in this room 25 years ago were already working to become the great people you are now. My generation has a great deal to learn from you. And at the same time, you need to understand that the challenges the youth faces today are completely different to those that you had back then. And we need to work together in order to generate appropriate solutions today and for our future. You have heard loud and clear the message of the teens of the world in the streets. Now, on behalf of millennials, I say, you told us to get educated before we could speak up. So we went and got degrees from the institutions you created. You told us to get jobs before demanding things from those in charge. So we went and created businesses and innovative products as the world has never seen before. You told us to grow up before thinking of changing the world. And we have grown indeed. But we, all of us, have already run out of time to keep waiting. Following the example of Esther Lynch, I would like to finish by sharing a little message of hope that now means everything to me and shows how much I'm giving to this work. A couple of weeks ago, my husband and I learned that we're expecting our first child. So our plan is to spend the next 16 years and the rest of our lives thereafter working to make sure that our kids does not have to skip school out of fear of having a future to get ready for. And because of the anxiety brought by the neglect of those who are supposed to take care of them and the world they live in. Going back to the great intervention of Professor Giovannini before, the bottom line is that I cannot afford a bunker in New Zealand for my kids, so this really has to work. I hope you have found something of value within this intervention, but ultimately, this is not important. What matters is the work that each of us gets to do outside of these walls to ensure that all of us have a future to look forward to. So together, let's get to work. Thank you. Thank you.
I think congratulations from all of us, Gabriella, and that was really a very powerful and moving speech. And just a reminder for all of us that the idealism of Generation Z should be harnessed and not discouraged for refusing to work with a broken system that's jeopardizing your future.
Thank you. Thank you for this kind word introduction. Thank you for this invitation and opportunity to discuss here in this prestigious whole and prestigious company. Important issue of the world today, energy and transmutation of waste. So to set up the landscape, let me start with these two pictures. The first one is a night photo of our Earth, okay? And immediately you see on that picture how badly energy is distributed all over the 5 continents, and equally, of course. And the second one that you have seen already this morning, the dominance of the energy consumption. Oh, sorry. Okay, I was speaking without my... Okay, so these two, let me start with the... Why I don't have... not moving. Can I move here? Can I use here?
Sorry. Okay, try now. Yes.
Yeah, so sorry for this technical art, which should not be there for a technical subject. Okay, anyway, especially laser. So let me comment this introduction. A picture of Earth by night, okay? And you see how badly the energy consumption and distribution is distributed over Earth. And the second one on the left, which is the energy consumption versus time, and the dominance, as you have heard many times today, the dominance of fossil energies over renewable and nuclear energy. The second thing I want to comment to say the landscape is this picture of relative carbon dioxide emission versus energy consumption. Each color there represents one of the EU countries. Okay, and you see clouds of points with different colors, which reflect the distribution of energy consumption per hour. So you have many, many points for each country because it has summer and winter, day and night, and so on. So if you look at the gray color, which is Poland, Poland has a very large CO2 emission and very little energy consumption. Okay? And this is because I use coal and oil. On the other lower part of that figure, you see a rather red, elongated cloud, which is France, which has very low CO2 emission and very large energy consumption. Because France is using mainly nuclear power plants and hydraulic, very little gas and coal. And now I want to focus your attention to the orange Germany globe of point, okay? Germany has invested 300 billion in the last 10 years in renewable energy, wind and solar. And despite that, it has very large CO2 emission. And you may ask why. Why? Because renewable energy are intermittent energy. They are not there when it's night. They are not there when there is no wind. So you need backup solution. And Germany decided to close nuclear power plants and to fire coal and gas power plant as a backup. And this is the result. So huge investment in the right direction, for no doubt. But if you don't take into account the whole picture, the result is not very, very exciting. Okay, so now let me come to the subject I want to discuss. Nuclear energy. This is a rather rather young form of energy of limited importance in the world, only 5% of the energy of the world. It's economically viable for electricity, and it is carbon-free. A lot of people have forgotten that. It's efficient. The fission of 14 grams of uranium produces the same energy that 1 ton of oil. The production, unfortunately, is concentrated in a few countries: USA, France, Japan, Russia, 2/3 of the world energy in a few countries. But, as you all know, it's a passionate, contested energy for its origin, which is related to defense, of course, its cost structure, high investment, delay return, and questions which are by many ways not sufficiently dealt with in the past: proliferation, that we want to avoid, of course, safety, that you know about it, and nuclear waste management. So let me try to discuss these issues. Management of current waste, what we are doing today. Okay, so there is, we take 300 tons of uranium from the ore. We make 30 tons of enriched uranium. We put it in the nuclear reactors. And after 1 gigawatt of production per year, 1 gigawatt production, electric production per year is the consumption of 1 million person in the city of Paris, for example. Okay, that's a big amount of energy. You get with 1 ton of fission material as a waste. And this waste has a very, very long time and high radiotoxicity. And the promoter of that type of management, we call it once true case, mainly US and Sweden, they want to put it in a geological depository for 300,000 years. It's maybe not acceptable in a southern world. There is a second strategy, which is mainly done by France. So what they do, instead of when they get 1 ton of fission material after 1 gigawatt, they separate uranium and plutonium, and they reuse the plutonium to produce a new fuel. If you do that, you are left only with 50 kilos of nuclear waste, and not 1 ton. Because you separate the uranium, which is not fission at all, very few of it is radioactive, and you reuse the plutonium, and you are left with what we call high-level radioactive waste, which are of the order of, and fission products, which are of the order of 50 kilos. But nevertheless, you have to deal with them with 10,000 years. So we still have a problem there. And the solution of transmutation is to reduce this period of time much more and to reduce the waste content to a few kilos. So how we do that? In principle, it's very simple for us. We have learned that for many decades. We have a particle called neutrons who hit a bad guy called neptunium-237, a very high radiotoxicity, half-life of 2.14 million years. We want to destroy it, right? So we hit it with the neutrons. It's fission in 2 blobs of particles, 2 different isotopes, and they become stable. So by doing that, the things who were 2 million years radioactive become stable just by hitting them by a neutron. Of course, it's a little more complex than that, but this is the principle of transmutation. So the motivation for transmutation is shown in this picture. You have, in the vertical scale, the radiotoxicity of the radioisotopes. On the horizontal scale, the time in years. And you see that the upper curve, it takes a long, long time to reach the red line. The red line is the radiotoxicity of uranium in the ore. This is what you want to achieve. You want to come back to original status. It takes 300,000 years. If you reprocess, like France and Japan, it takes only 10,000 years, okay? Reducing by a large amount. And if you transmit the fuel by transmutation, as I showed you before, it will take only 300 years of storage, okay? So we have reduced it in duration by a factor of 1,000 and by volume by a factor of 100. So it is a very valuable scheme that we want to use. There is a technology which is accelerator particle. We can produce this neutron and transmute the waste. But this technology is very expensive, very demanding, very costly. There is a project in Belgium which is going to do that. But with my colleague, Gérard Mourou, who just got the Nobel Prize, and he got the Nobel Prize because he found a way to make the laser light very, very intense, okay? Many order of magnitude higher than was achieved in the mid-80s. And by doing that, we can build up a system based on laser. We can transmute the waste. And this is the goal and the origin of this project that I want to share with you today. And we call it a transmutator. And I finish here. I have just 1 minute more. I want to explain to you that you put this laser in the center of a tank where the liquid has dissolved all the waste that you want to transmute. And it's safe because the liquid has a very high level boiling point, so it will never explode or get in the air. Secondly, we can monitor the content of that liquid and radiotoxic waste by the laser in time, in real time. We can know at every second what is going on there, which is burning, which is staying there. So we have a nice control. And after, it is safe because as soon as you lose the power, the laser stops and everything stops. So nothing to fear, nothing to be afraid of. It will just cool down by itself without any other external operation. Okay, so this is my conclusion. Nuclear energy do not appear anymore to be a solved technical question. Overall society, economical, boundary condition, as you have heard all the day today, have evolved significantly since 1980. Innovation is and will be required. Both fundamental and applied research contribute, especially in the multidisciplinary aspect, because you need physics, chemistry, and also societal acceptability. In any nuclear scenario, either you stop nuclear energy, or you continue, or you increase. Transmutation of high-level waste is a feasible solution to reduce the heat load, the volume, and the time of the storage. In addition, into the long term, it will make the transition to carbon-free energy more realistic, to a safer and more acceptable nuclear energy contribution. Thank you. Sorry for being so long.
Wow, thank you for making an incredibly complex subject surprisingly easy to understand. I'd like to open the floor to questions now from the audience. Please say who on the panel you'd like to direct your question to, and you can also tell us which organisation you're from, if you like. Over here.
You hear me? Yeah, sorry. To Gabriela Lagunes, first I want to say I think you're doing a really, really cool thing. And I wanted to ask you regarding your work in the future, how confident are you? Because of the real influential decision makers, are they supportive or more resistant?
Thank you for your question. I think, I think we ought to remain hopeful. I think today has been a great example of all the work and all the knowledge that is being put into action. But I think it's really a case-by-case thing. I gave in the talk the example of the government of Togo, for example. It's really surprising how the governments of developing countries how these countries are open to innovation and to solutions because they are aware of the magnitude of the challenges that we're facing. So it's really hopeful to see the speed of the change and all the growth that is being made to try to help people. And then you have things like Brexit. I mean, I think instead of concentrating on how difficult things look sometimes, we just have to keep working and keep raising our voices so that the authorities that we have now keep going in the right direction.
Any more questions?
Lo scenario che ci è stato presentato dal professor Giovannini mi richiama un'opera pittorica, l'angelo di Paul Klee, l'angelo della storia, un angelo che si libera sopra le macerie, sono quello che succederebbe, secondo il professor Giovannini, ove non si intervenisse in tempo debito e in modo opportuno. Angelo si libera sopra le materie che lui vorrebbe fermare, ma non può, perché il vento gonfia le sue ali e lo trascina sempre più lontano. Gli rimane solo di fissare questa situazione, queste macerie, per trarre valori, stimoli, coi quali poter andare verso il futuro che avanza. Macerie ce ne sono tante, però penso che debba essere tutto questo affrontato con ottimismo. E si tratta di impegnarci, ciascuno di noi, dalle istituzioni alle comunità, ai singoli, in un concetto proprio anche partecipativo di comunità, in maniera non isolata. Lo dice anche Papa Francesco, che la considerazione parziale e inidonea a interpretare, ad affrontare, a comprendere persino il rapporto fra l'uomo e l'ambiente, fra l'uomo e tutto che lo circonda. Quindi riuscire a cogliere in noi stessi quello che veramente vale. E qui mi sovviene un attimo quel che dice Ottavio Paz, Nobel della letteratura colombiano, in El arco e la lira, la sua opera. Lui dice che per realizzare se stesso bisogna essere quell'altro che ciascuno porta dentro di sé come speranza o possibilità di essere. Concludo con un proverbio cinese che dice: quando tramonta il sole non piangere, altrimenti non vedrai neanche le stelle.
Ma io non so se è una domanda o ma provo a dirle come la sento. Nel mio ultimo libro, che si chiama Utopia sostenibile, provo a dire che noi abbiamo davanti 4 diversi atteggiamenti con cui ognuno di noi uscirà da questa stanza. Il primo: il modello attuale può ancora funzionare. Auguri. Ma no, ma lo dico da economista, auguri. Perché se voi pensate che il sistema possa ancora funzionare, credo che possiate anche credere che la Terra sia piatta. Non c'è nessuna differenza. Seconda soluzione: la visione distopica di cui ho parlato, che porta appunto alcuni a comprarsi bunker in Nuova Zelanda. Cioè, ricordate quel libro, Io speriamo che me la cavo. Ed ero l'altro giorno a Trento, parlando con l'assessore all'ambiente, il quale mi spiegava quello che stavano facendo, eccetera, e gli ho detto, sapete che ci sono famiglie ricche europee che stanno smobilizzando le loro attività nel sud Europa e stanno comprando case in Norvegia. Preparatevi a un sacco di italiani che col cambiamento climatico vorranno cambiare e verranno qui. È rimasto veramente sbiancato perché ha capito che l'immigrazione non è il problema solo dell'Africa, avremo migrazioni interne di gente che vorrà scappare da dove sta. Terza possibile ipotesi, l'ipotesi della retrotopia di cui parla Bauman, che è quello che sta accadendo. Let's make US great again. Cioè, torniamo indietro. Bauman dice chiaramente, il problema di questa generazione è che sta facendo uno dei grandi salti della storia. Così come quando siamo usciti dalle caverne e abbiamo costruito le città e poi gli stati, e cioè abbiamo allargato ogni volta il concetto di noi e abbiamo ristretto quello di loro. Adesso siamo all'ultimo stadio, dice Bauman. Tutti siamo noi, e ci dice Papa Francesco, anche il pianeta siamo noi. Peccato che questo cambiamento lo stiamo facendo in 40 anni, mentre gli altri cambiamenti li abbiamo fatti in centinaia, se non migliaia di anni. E gran parte delle persone non hanno neanche gli strumenti culturali per rispondere a questo. Dunque, torniamo indietro. Quarta alternativa, credere ancora che i Sustainable Development Goals e questa agenda sia il futuro, ma vuol dire uscire da qui e prendere decisioni radicali sul modo in cui ci comportiamo.
Penso che dobbiamo andare alla prossima domanda. Grazie.
Work? Okay. This is Giovanni Ferri from LUMSA University here in Rome. And, very stimulating panel, and congratulations to Centesimus Annus Foundation for having chosen these topics. My question is for Ms. Langsong. I was, during the last couple of weeks in East Asia and South Asia, and I experienced on my skin what Enrico Giovannini was saying earlier, that there is a lot more awareness about the sustainability issue in Europe than there is in that part of the world. And I wonder how a discussion among various religions can help, also because we are discussing here and it has a meaning.
You mean we should have more interreligious discussions? I believe so. Yeah. For instance, I'm from Malaysia. Malaysia is a multicultural country, multi-religious country. And the way we discuss religions with each other is not just in a forum. We discuss it almost on an everyday level. Lunch, talking is everywhere. It's very much part of our lives. It's not a structured or a very sort of like just make up a dialogue. I think it's very important that we have exchanges on a daily basis. As for China, I'm not too familiar with China because I'm not from China. And China is a communist country. I think it has its own concern. I think respect for that. But we do have associates from China, and we are free to talk about religion with them. But on the larger level, I'm afraid I can't, talk about China. But if you want to ask about Malaysia, I can.
Should we go to the next question?
Dan Brennan, I'm a member of the House of Lords in the UK. 2 questions, but first of all, my thanks to the Fondazione for allowing me to escape from the UK for 3 days. and of course, to escape from Brexit, which has become a national medical condition, which there is no known cure affecting everybody in a completely different way. But I wanted to reassure any of you who wanted to talk to me that I'm led to believe that it's not contagious. Two related questions. One, this is the action section.
Who are your questions for?
Chinese lady and the young lady who's about to have a child. Two related points. This is the action section of the program. I'm very much in favor of living the Fondazione's Laudato Si title bottom up, as we say in English. Not just from top down at the international level. And bottom up, we've seen in the United States, cities, through mayors, some states, communities, are definitely in favor of integral ecology. Is it possible to produce a basis for action which could be properly and successfully implemented by municipalities and communities through community action? And related to that, whatever the agenda is in this 21st century concerning Laudato Si, it's the one part of the world's agenda that has been seized by the young in years, young in spirit. How do we ensure that their voice is heard effectively and they feel that their future that they're talking about, we should protect? Thank you.
Sure. I think it's a really great and really complex question, and I can only go back to the experience in my work. I think it all goes down to priorities. So in BBox, you have a lot of young people, a lot of young professionals that could be working in many other sectors and could be doing many other things. But the company itself and everybody that works there has our customers as a core value. So we create products that are supposed to help those in the bottom of the pyramid. So we create our business models thinking on giving a service first and then making sure that the way we give those services is economically sustainable. Talking about communities and governments, you go to a place where I hope to be at some point in the future, but I think it's the same thing. It's what is the priority of the government and what is the priority of the community? Is the people or is it production? And unfortunately, I'm also escaping from Brexit. I think that's a problem we can see right now in the UK. We are really struggling to define our priorities, and that has to be fixed, hopefully as soon as possible, through education, through the enhancement of important religious values that are in Laudato Si and the Catholic social teachings, and ultimately in the belief systems of any world religion that you look at. So yeah, we just have to keep working.
I think last year we had an election that almost shook the whole world, in which a government that was in power for 60 years was overturned democratically. Before that, we have a lot of discussions, and so discussions and exchanges from a person to individuals to families. We are all actually talking and talking and talking. And I remember even in my family, we have this big discussion, and we were absolutely in disagreement. But in the end, we all agree that the opposition has won, and just move forward. We need not go to the street. We don't need to protest. I think this kind of communication at the community level actually can change and move forward the communities and also the government. And I certainly feel that individuals and to the communities can play a big role in actually affecting how the government runs. And don't overlook individual. The faith factor in there. Faith is how it makes us tolerant, accepting. That difference is like living in a home. We need to tolerate each other's differences. And that's why we advocate perhaps these differences can be resolved in classrooms through virtues cultivation. Thank you.
I think Professor Giovannini is going to answer that one as well.
Yes, an answer. As I said, introducing in the Constitution the principle of intergenerational equity, that would be a big, big step forward. But however, as I know that there are a lot of business persons here, something that you can do is to transform your company into a benefit corporation or in any of the other new types of companies that commit themselves to follow the sustainable development principles, and they decide to reinvest the profits. So it's not doing profits, but to use profits in a different way. This would be a way to change capitalism in the right direction.
Thank you, Carla Francini. This is a question for Sabina Alcail, Professor Alcail, and Professor Giovannini. I would like to ask, please, your opinion about the level and the role of public debate and public reasoning in reaching a clear-headed understanding of what the real problems are. Thank you.
Sure. There are many participatory discussions about poverty and about well-being, and Enrico can answer also about those within Italy, where you've tried to listen across many different communities to what are the dimensions and indicators of poverty or of well-being, and then synthesize that. And that's very, very useful, and there's a whole activity. And I think it's useful for several reasons. One is that you are then demonstrating an interest. It's not a top-down process, but you're involving people and also involving the policy actors. And a second reason that's important is that you then become sensitized to the contextual differences. We do this with national statistics offices, and you take them to the field, you interview a community, you talk about poverty, then that night you do a survey of the community, analyze it at night, give it back to the community, and they say, no, that one's not poor and this one is, and then they tell you why. And so you really get into their understandings of what poverty is. So I think it's very important to do that. At the same time, when there are clear, already a social consensus from that kind of a process, then there's no need to waste people's time and do it again. And so then that can be used, in a sense, to go forward.
Thank you. With Sabina, we look very young, but we have been working since 2004 together around the world to try to change the metrics to stimulate public debate going beyond GDP. And now SDGs are extremely important in order to foster this discussion. Media are in big, big troubles to discuss this kind of things because these are complex things, and it's not easy to convince them to talk about complex problems. On top, politicians don't like to talk about issues that they cannot claim they have a solution for. And again, these are complex problems with complex solutions. But there are exceptions. Let me take you to New Zealand, the other side of the world. The Prime Minister of New Zealand, who is a woman, first of all, not only decided to give the New Zealander citizenship to all people who will be displaced from small Pacific islands because of climate change, exactly like in Italy. Exactly like in Europe, okay? And then what she said, what she presented last week was the reorganization of the state budget according to the dimensions of well-being on which we have worked with Sabina for years. And she indicated 5 priorities which link some of the points you heard today. First, mental health. remember what Jeffrey Sachs said about what's going on in US. Second, eradicate poverty youth poverty. Third, fight against inequalities, especially for indigenous populations. Four, take everybody into the digital age. Fifth, change the economy towards a carbon-free system. And she had planned all the investments and the public expenditures and so on without cutting everything else, but signaling to the whole country that these are the 5 most important topics. So political leaderships make a difference in the public discourse. Maybe only women are able to do that.
Ardian Foti, per il professor Giovannini. Professore, visto che siamo in tema, scusate se parlo italiano, magari vengo tradotto meglio di quanto mi esprima. Tutte queste priorità di cui ha parlato anche del programma nel New Zealand, nella Nuova Zelanda, potrebbero in qualche modo corrispondere anche alle priorità delle politiche europee, anche perché non mi sembra che ci sia qualcosa di diverso, voglio dire, nelle varie latitudini globali. E poi un'altra cosa fondamentale, non ho ancora capito se i partiti verdi al potere che saliranno al governo presso la Commissione europea, visto che lei ha in qualche modo accennato a questo accoglimento delle priorità di cui ha parlato nella sua relazione, abbiano parlato di riduzione dei costi della Carta dell'Unione Europea. Non ho sentito nessun né Partito Verde europeo e né alcun tipo di leader europeo in carica e quelli che verranno nel abolire 2 sedi parlamentari. 33 tonnellate di carta al giorno fanno Bruxelles-Strasburgo. Potete immaginare con quale inquinamento. Tutte le sedi delle varie agenzie in Europa.
La domanda
è questa, cioè stiamo parlando di qualcosa di cui gli stessi ovviamente leader europei dei maggiori partiti che hanno la maggioranza, a cui non hanno trovato una soluzione concreta per espletare un piano concreto ecologico della nuova Europa. E questo riguarda anche la consapevolezza che devono dare ai cittadini per poter confrontarsi. Cioè, in che cosa si riduce? Vogliamo fare un piano anche per esempio, per i nuovi lavoratori? Dedichiamo questo budget risparmiato ai poveri europei? Questo dobbiamo fare per poter espandere in
dobbiamo
qualche modo.
chiudere tra poco, quindi per chi era la domanda?
Per il professor Giovannini, l'ho già detto.
Possiamo farlo rispondere.
Prego.
Grazie. Intanto vedremo che cosa esce fuori da queste negoziazioni. Attenzione però, si figuri se non sono d'accordo sul fatto che l'Europa deve fare molto di più in campo sociale. Ma oggi il trattato non dice questo. Le politiche sociali sono in carico ai singoli paesi. Quindi bisogna dire se siamo pronti a cambiare il trattato o meno, il che espande ulteriormente i problemi. Se vuole saperne di più, noi abbiamo pubblicato un rapporto, una commissione indipendente su Sustainable Equality a gennaio, dove trova tantissime proposte. Concludo con un riferimento al fatto che certamente gli stili di vita di tutti noi sono importanti. Quando ho incontrato Greta qui a Roma, quando è venuta, ha detto nel suo discorso: ma voi adulti perché avete bisogno delle cannucce? Non sapete bere nel bicchiere? Ecco, se noi andiamo a guardare i nostri singoli comportamenti, forse scopriamo che per essere credibili dobbiamo cambiare tutti e giustamente pretendere che anche i politici facciano altrettanto. Ma guardate che i politici normalmente seguono, raramente guidano. Quindi cambiamo noi, siamo più coerenti e soprattutto, come è stato detto, smettiamolo di dire che gli altri dovrebbero fare, perché non è vero che ognuno deve fare la sua parte. Ognuno deve fare molto più della sua parte perché c'è qualcuno che non sta facendo la sua parte.